Principal photography started in October 1948. The first day on set as a lead actress it's different from everything before. Not because the set is different. A studio set looks the same as the studio set where I was an extra. The same gray buildings without windows. The man with the list at the entrance. Cables and lights and the smell of air that's different from outside air because it's the air of an enclosed, constantly used space, saturated with the electrical warmth of the lamps. Different because I'm differently seen. When I was an extra, no one saw me enter. I entered, I got my number, I stood where they told me. The first day as a lead actress on this set, I walk through the same revolving doors, down the same corridor, and along the way I register something new. People see me entering. The AD, "Miss Lane, good morning. The dressing room is here." The makeup artist, not Ruth from the screen test, a different woman, Marta. "Good morning, Miss Lane. We'll start right away." The second AD, "Miss Lane, the director will be here in 20 minutes. In the meantime, we can go over the schedule?" This is a different reality. Not morally better, logistically better. Better in the sense that you're working with people who see you're there and who have specific tasks arising from your presence on this set. As an extra, you were invisible. Now you're seen. That changes something in the experience of the work. It doesn't make you a better actress. Talent is what it is. But it makes the environment more proportionate to what you are. Ruben as a director on set. I'd seen him in the negotiations. No, I hadn't been. Harriet didn't take me, which was the right decision, because contract negotiations and the artistic relationship are two different spheres, and mixing them is a mistake. I saw him briefly at the screen test. On set, I see him properly. Ruben works quietly. That's rare among directors. Most of them are loud because loudness is a form of authority, a form of marking the space as theirs. Ruben is quiet. He speaks to the crew quietly, to the actors quietly, to the camera. Well, he doesn't speak to the camera. He speaks to the operator, but he speaks quietly. And he looks. Ruben looks at the set with the same concentration with which he looks at an image through the camera's viewfinder, equally intensely, equally seeking something specific. Before our first scene, Ruben comes over, says, "Remember what we talked about yesterday?" Says, "Yes. Yesterday, we talked about the fact that in this scene, the character isn't sad, she's free. And that freedom after a long absence of freedom doesn't look like joy. It looks like astonishment." I say, "Astonishment." Ruben looks at me for a moment, says, "Ready?" Says, "Yes." Camera rolls. A concrete day on set, hour by hour. I want to give you a concrete day, just as I gave a concrete day on a film set as an extra, because the concrete speaks a truth that abstractions don't. Wednesday, October 1948. Third day of principal photography. 6:30. I wake before the alarm. As always, on shooting days, the body doesn't need an alarm because the body knows. Coffee, quick, standing by the window. Thomas goes out earlier. His meetings begin at 8, and Thomas is the kind of man who arrives 15 minutes before any meeting. I hear him leave, hear the door, and return to the coffee and the notes I made the previous evening. Notes. This is a difference between filmmaking and acting that I discovered. In film, you take notes, throughout the day if necessary. I keep a notepad by the bed. Thomas knows. Thomas respects this, because thoughts come when they come, and if you don't write them down at night, by morning you don't even remember they existed. 7:15. The studio driver. The studio sends a driver. This is part of the contract. It's logistics. It's also a certain statement about how the studio views its resource. A lead actress doesn't take the streetcar to set. Not because the streetcar is beneath her, because the streetcar is too small as a gesture. Studios make gestures. The driver is a gesture. I don't complain about the gesture. The driver's name is George. George has been driving for the studio for 4 years, and in that time has seen more actresses than most critics, and has toward them an attitude that is polite and entirely free of any interest in their status. To George, I'm a passenger he delivers on time. That is refreshing. In the car, silence, or the radio. George asks once at the start of every day whether I want the radio. I say yes or no, depending on what's before me. Wednesday, October. A difficult scene. No radio. We drive in silence through Manhattan. 7:45. The studio. Entrance. The same man with the list as always, but now my name is at the top of the list, not in the middle. George sees me to the door and drives away. He'll wait when we finish. When, he doesn't know. I don't know. No one knows until roughly 2 in the afternoon, when the day's schedule crystallizes. Corridor. Dressing room. Marta, my makeup artist on this project, not Ruth from the screen test, a different Marta, is already in the dressing room when I arrive. She has coffee. 2 coffees. One for herself, one for me, which is a gesture I've appreciated since the first day of shooting, and which I never asked her for. Marta works in silence, like Ruth. Good makeup artists work in silence. Bad makeup artists talk, and that talk is either gossip about other actors, or complaints about the director, or questions about your private life. Each of these options is information you don't want in your head at 8 in the morning before a difficult scene. Marta is silent. She works for 45 minutes. During this time, I sit with coffee, with the text. Not learning. I know the text. I read to remind myself who's saying these words. Not Vera Lane, the woman in this story. I enter her slowly, through the text, through the coffee, through the silence. The dressing room is a ritual. Rituals are tools. 9:45. Miss Lane, we're ready. I stand. I approach the camera operator who positions me in the frame, checks where I stand in relation to the lights, where my face is when I speak in the direction I'll be speaking. This takes 5 minutes. 5 minutes in which I stand in a specific place and listen to the technicians discussing centimeters and degrees and the angle of the light. 5 minutes in which I'm exactly between Vera Lane and the character. At some point, when the technicians are ready, Ruben approaches, says, "Do you remember what we talked about yesterday?" I say, "Yes. Yesterday we talked about the fact that in this scene, the woman isn't sad. She is free. And that freedom after a long absence of freedom doesn't look like joy. It looks like astonishment." I say, "Astonishment." Ruben looks at me for a moment, says, "Ready?" I say, "Yes." Camera rolls. 2:30. End of the shooting day for me. Not the end for the crew, but my scenes for today are done. I return to the dressing room. Marta removes the makeup. The same ritual as applying it, only reversed. I remove the costume. I put on my own clothes. I'm Vera Lane again. Not entirely. For a few hours after shooting, there's that layer, that space where the character still lingers a little, where her way of thinking is still accessible before you fully return to your own. I've learned to respect that layer, not to exit the character too quickly, to give her time to leave naturally. George is waiting outside. I ride home. At home, tea. Silence, not the text. I'll deal with the text tomorrow morning. Tonight, give the body and mind time to come down from the intensity a shooting day carries. Jack calls, says, "How did it go?" I say, "Astonishment." He's silent for a moment, says, "That's a good instruction." I say, "From Ruben." He says, "I know where it's from. Did you execute it well?" I say, "I think so." He says, "That's enough for today." We hang up. Tomorrow, another shooting day, Another scene. Different astonishment, or different grief, or different freedom. That's how the work looks. The studio had a press department. The studio's press department in 1948 is, how to describe it? It's a department that produces a version of you for the world. Not a lying version, not necessarily, but a chosen one. Carefully curated for what the studio wants the world to know about Vera Lane, and what should help sell tickets. My man from the press department was named Gerald. Gerald was a slim man in a good suit, who always had a notepad and a pencil, and asked me questions that surprised me. Not about films, not about roles, about my childhood, about my favorite food, about what I do on Sunday mornings. I said, I sit in a coffee shop and drink coffee. Gerald wrote this down and said, we can do something with that. I didn't know what you could do with coffee on a Sunday morning, but Gerald knew. He had a vision of Vera Lane who is elegant but accessible, refined but not cold, a woman of taste but not from another world. Coffee at a coffee shop on a Sunday morning was a piece of that vision. Press photography. The studio photographer is an artist. I say this without irony, because photographing actors for the press in 1948 is an art with its own rules, its own aesthetics, its own language. The photos that come out of the studio's press department are carefully lit, carefully framed, carefully selected for what they show you to be. My first press photos, a 3-hour session, 3 costume changes, 6 different lights. The photographer, a Mr. Marcus, who'd been working in this industry for 30 years, and who talked to me throughout the session about anything at all, so my face would be the face of someone who's talking and not someone who's posing. When Vera Lane poses, he said, the camera sees it. When Vera Lane is, the camera sees that too. And only one of those two is worth keeping. He was right. The session lasted 3 hours. Good photographs? 8. 8 photographs from a 3-hour session. That's a ratio that says something about the work in this industry. Interviews? Gerald arranged interviews with journalists, not with everyone who asked, with the selected ones. The right newspapers, the right journalists, the right moment in the production cycle. My first interview as a lead actress is a separate experience I want to describe, because it's surprising in several places. The journalist from a major paper, I won't say which, a Mr. Whitmore, 45 years old, elegant, with the natural confidence of someone who talks to interesting people professionally for years, and has formed certain views on people. He came to Manny's. Yes, to Manny's. Gerald chose this coffee shop when I described my Sunday habits, and we sat at my table for an hour. Mr. Whitmore asked questions that were partly interesting and partly formula. What inspires you? How did you choose this profession? What's your favorite role you've played? And to the formula questions, I gave formula answers that were true but not intimate. To the interesting questions, I answered. One of the interesting questions was, what do you think an audience should take from a good film? I said, I don't think an audience should take anything in particular. A film that gives you something to take, wonderful. A film that is 2 hours of beautiful story you can live in on a Saturday evening instead of your own life, and then you leave and return to your own life a little lighter. That's also enough. Mr. Whitmore wrote this down. When the interview came out, that sentence was the first paragraph. The first paragraph, which in a newspaper article is the place that decides whether someone reads on. Gerald said it was one of the better opening paragraphs he'd seen in interviews with actresses, and that he hadn't known I had a talent for it. I said, it's not a talent. It's years of listening to people talk in bars. Gerald wrote that down too, in a separate notebook. I think that notebook was an archive of Vera Lane, according to Gerald, and is somewhere to this day in some office. Evening Star had its premiere in March 1949. A studio premiere it's a different ceremony from a Broadway opening. A Broadway opening is the audience in the theater, actors backstage, the curtain rises. Done. A studio film premiere is a crowd outside the theater, photographers, a red carpet if the studio's budget allows, Gerald at your side, whispering who is standing where, and with whom you may speak, and with whom you may not. My first film premiere. The red carpet. I want to tell you what it feels like to walk the red carpet for the first time, because it's an experience that is known from outside and completely different from inside. From outside, an elegant woman in an elegant dress walks through a crowd of photographers. She looks beautiful. She looks calm. She looks as though this is natural. From inside, you hear your own heart. You feel every centimeter of the gown, which is new and which you haven't worn before, and which behaves in motion in ways you don't yet know well enough. You hear the photographers calling your name, and you learn, in real time, how to turn when they call so everyone gets a good shot and you don't look like you're spinning. Gerald told me beforehand, "Walk slower than you think you should. It's always too fast." He was right. I walked slower than I thought I should. The photographs turned out well. The film was released. Reviews were... I wrote that they were mixed. Mixed means people noticed and had opinions. For a debut lead actress, mixed reviews is a result that Dorothy from the press department described as a very good starting point. One review in the Times, Miss Lane brings to the role that rare combination of intelligence and sensitivity that makes the camera love her even when she's not thinking about it. From that I took, intelligence and sensitivity were visible. The rest, the camera loves her, is a phrase the press uses that means less than it sounds. But people went to the cinema. In the first week, the studio counted this, studios always count this, the film earned enough that the studio called Harriet to ask when I could begin discussing the next project. The next project. It was 1949, and there was already a next project. I want to tell you about one moment, one specific moment in 1949 that was different from all previous moments and that told me something had changed. March, a week after the premiere. I'm walking along 6th Avenue. A woman walking toward me stops. She looks at me, says, "Are you Vera Lane?" The first stranger on the street who recognizes me. Not from the theater, from the screen. From a face on screen that is my face, but is also something more than my face, because it's the face of a character. And these two images overlap in this woman's mind as she looks at me on 6th Avenue. I say, "Yes." She says, "I saw your film on Friday." A pause. I cried. I say, "Thank you." She says, "I wanted you to know." She nods, walks on. I stand for a moment on the sidewalk. I think about what the woman said in Manny's in the previous episode. My neighbor whose daughter said, "Mommy, she's sad," at the matinee. I think about how those two moments are the same moment. When something you did reaches someone you don't know, and that person feels enough to want to tell you. She cried at the film. She wanted me to know. I know. And I know, too, that this woman wasn't crying at Vera Lane. She was crying at the character. She was crying at the story. She was crying at something the film built and something she brought into the cinema from her own life. Because they always bring something from their own lives. The film always meets something that's already inside. My work is to be real enough that that meeting is possible. That day on 6th Avenue, it was possible. That's enough. I want to tell you something about the difference between theater and film as working environments, because I've worked in both, and the difference is more fundamental than you think. Theater. Alive. Every performance is unique. It is that specific evening, that specific audience, that specific energy in the house. A mistake is a mistake. You can't take it back, you can only continue. A success is a success that lasts 2 hours and then it's gone, until the next evening. Film. Permanent. What you do on set is recorded and stays. A mistake can be made in the first take and not used. Take the second, or the 5th, or the 18th. But when the film is finished and released, it stays. Forever. Or for as long as cinemas and projectors exist. In theater, you perform for the house that's before you. You see them, you hear their breathing, you feel when the house is with you and when it's against you. You can respond to what they do, not dramatically, subtly, but you can. In film, you perform for a camera that doesn't breathe. The camera is absolutely objective. It records what is, without sympathy and without antipathy. The result of that recording will be seen by someone in the lab, and someone in the projection room, and someone in a cinema in a city you don't know. And none of those stages is any part of yours. You give to the camera, and you don't know. In theater, the response is immediate. In film, the response comes weeks, months, years later. Which form is better? Neither. They're different, and each teaches you something the other doesn't. And an actress who does only one knows half her profession. I did both throughout my career. Not always simultaneously, not always logistically possible, but alternating. And every return to theater after film, and every return to film after theater, was a journey that brought something new to what I was returning to. Something I haven't mentioned, but which is a central part of the work: other actors. A film scene is a shared space. Even a monologue, which by definition is solo, exists in a space that has someone on the other side, whether a camera, a character off-screen, or simply the energy of the set. But scenes with other actors are a different kind of work. The best scene I played in this period, that 40-second one with Harrington, was a solo scene. But the second of my favorite moments from this time was a scene with an actor named Walter Crane, who played a character who knew something about my character that I didn't know about his. Walter Crane was an actor of the old school, the school that taught a scene is sequential. You perform, then I perform, then you, then me. We don't overlap. We don't react to what's being said before it's finished. We do the text. I came from a different school. The school that a scene is alive, that the reaction to what your partner says is part of the text, that listening is an action just as speaking is. First take of our shared scene. Walter did his text, I did my text, and the scene was correct and dead as a fish in a fishmonger's window. Harrington said, "Again, Walter, listen to her when she speaks." Walter said, with the patience of someone explaining something that should be obvious, "I hear her." Harrington said, "Listen, you're not hearing." Walter looked at me with the expression of a man who isn't sure whether to be insulted or curious, said to me, "What is she doing differently?" I said, "I don't know what I'm doing. I know what the character is doing. The character is listening to your character as though what he says determines something important." Walter thought for a moment, said, "Do it again from the top." Second take. Walter listened. When Walter listened, truly listened, wasn't waiting for his text, but was present with what I was saying, something changed in the scene. It became alive. It became an exchange rather than a series of monologues. Harrington, after the second take, said nothing for a moment, then said to the operator, "That's the one." Walter, after that scene, lit a cigarette and said to me without particular inflection, Good technique. That was Walter Crane's equivalent of a compliment. I took it. There's something about playing roles over years, many different roles, in different genres, in different contexts, that I want to tell you, because it's not obvious from outside. Every role teaches you something about people. Not about people in general, about specific people in specific situations. When for 6 weeks of rehearsals and 3 weeks of shooting, you live inside the psychology of a woman who does something you wouldn't do, a woman who lies, who leaves, who stays when she should go, you learn that woman from the inside. And when you know her from the inside, you understand her. Not condone, understand. That is one of the hidden gifts of this profession, that through playing many different people, you understand many different people, and that understanding stays with you when the role ends. You become, through it, larger. Not wiser, larger. More fits inside you. I've played women I despised at the beginning of rehearsals and understood by the end of shooting. I've played women I loved from the start and whose complexity I discovered gradually. I've played women completely different from me and who after 6 weeks were speaking in my voice so naturally I forgot where my thought ended and theirs began. This makes you a different person. Better? I don't know. Different. More capacious. And that capaciousness is, alongside technique, alongside the tape and the numbers on the badges and the prop hard-boiled eggs, one of the true values of this profession. I must tell you something about fame that isn't said in films about famous people, but which is true, and which I discovered gradually as my name began appearing on posters. Fame doesn't fill anything. I say this precisely. I'm not saying fame is bad or that it's good. I'm saying it's a tool. Like all tools, it can be used, it can be misused. You can have it and not know what to do with it. When I was 32 and at Manny's with 70% hope for every Monday, I was a person who had everything fame can't give. Friendships, a sense of purpose in the work, a structure of days that was mine, clarity about what I wanted. When I was 36, and my name was on the poster of a major studio production, I had all of that plus recognition. Recognition is a new layer that settles onto what already exists. If what already exists is solid, the layer lies well. If it doesn't exist, the layer has nothing to lie on. Men and women who come to fame without a foundation built from something real. That is a story I've observed over years in this industry. And it is a story that rarely ends well. And that is not a moral judgment of those people, merely an observation of what happens when the external precedes the internal. I had a foundation. I built it over 7 years. Fame settled onto it and lay well. But the foundation was mine. Fame didn't build it. I want to tell you what the rise actually means, because the word sounds romantic and the reality is different. The rise is not a moment. The rise is a process that takes years and which, looked at from outside, appears to be a series of lucky accidents. The right call at the right time, the right director, the right role, the right film. From inside, the rise looks like 7 years of extra work and waitressing, and practicing in cold rooms and auditions that don't go anywhere, and the mathematics of surviving the month. And in the middle of all that, a decision, made daily, not once, daily, to continue, to be ready, so that when the right phone call comes, you have something to answer it with. The rise is built from preparation. Luck delivers the opportunity. Preparation takes it. I took it. And I took it because for 7 years, in those cold rooms, with those prop eggs, with those numbers on the badges, I was ready. Next episode. What happens when the summit is close, and what you do with it when you reach it. Come back.